Elias turned away respectfully, his jaw clenched. He listened to the sound of gentle sucking, the rhythm of life returning to a body that had almost crossed the threshold. When it was over, Mara placed the baby next to the fire. "He'll need more than one meal," she said softly. "I can come back," Elias offered. She nodded without looking at him. "What's his name?" "Don't know," Elias said. "His mother called him something once, but I never found out. Thought maybe you'd give him one." Mara hesitated. "Names are important, so choose one that means he will live." She looked at the boy's tiny fingers, clutching at nothing. "Joey," she finally said. "He looks like a Joey," Elias nodded. "Then his name shall be Joey." He stood up and adjusted his hat. "Thank you, don't thank me," she replied. "You don't know what this will cost." Elias paused at the door. "Sometimes the price doesn't matter when you pay for a life." Their eyes met again. Two broken souls, connected by the same silent grief. Then he stepped out into the fog and disappeared into the night. Mara sat by the fire long after he had left. The flames danced on the walls, casting long shadows that looked all too much like ghosts. Joey stirred in his sleep, his breath rough but steady. She stroked his forehead with her hand. "You're warm," she whispered. "That's good. Warm means alive." From the window, she could see the outlines of Dry Hollow below the town, sleeping under its shroud of fog and condemnation. She could already feel their stares, the whispers that would come when someone found out she had taken in a stranger's child. Worse yet, a child of mixed blood. Her late husband's family had barely tolerated her after Samuel's death. Now they would surely call her cursed. But Joey's little chest rose and fell, and that was all that mattered. For the first time since Samuel's funeral, the cabin no longer felt completely empty. She stared at the tiny rattle on the table. It had belonged to her son. Without thinking, she placed it next to Joey. "Maybe you'll like it better than he did," she murmured. The wind rattled the shutters again and she swore. She heard a whisper in the sound. Something that sounded like a baby's laughter, carried from afar. Elias rode back towards the mountains. He didn't look back until he reached the treeline. His cabin was gone, burned down weeks ago by men who had seen him as a threat, a reminder of what they had tried to erase. He now lived off the land, carrying only what fit in his saddlebag. His wife's necklace, a flask of whiskey, and a promise he had learned not to break, to protect what was left. He dismounted near a stream and let his horse drink. He crouched down and touched the cold water. He thought of the woman in the cabin, how her eyes had trembled, not from fear, but from memory. Perhaps she had found something in the baby that he could not give him. The fog thickened again. Elias looked up at the faint light of Mara's cabin far below him. "Hold on, little one," he whispered. "You have more fight in you than you know." Then he turned back to the darkness. By dawn, Mara had not slept. She sat in the rocking chair, watching Joey's chest rise and fall. Every breath felt like a fragile victory. Cassie June stirred in the attic above her, rubbing her eyes and peering down. "Miss Mara," she yawned. "Who is that baby?" Mara hesitated. "Just someone who needed a little help." Cassie climbed down. Curiosity shone in her eyes. "He's terribly small." "He is strong," Mara corrected gently. "He will live." Cassie tilted her head. "The town won't be too pleased that you've taken in a strange baby." Mara's eyes remained on the child. "The town does not rule my house," the girl frowned. "Still, people talk." Mara finally looked up, and something wild, unyielding, burned in her gaze. "Let them talk. The day I let their words decide who lives or dies in my care, that day I am worth nothing." Cassie nodded slowly, though she didn't quite understand. She looked out the window at the swirling fog. Somewhere within it, a lonely figure made his way back into the hills. That night, Mara stood at the door, the baby cradled in her arms. The fog was thick again, enveloping the world in silence. She whispered into the darkness, "Come back tomorrow if he makes it through the night." High in the woods, Elias heard her voice faintly carried by the wind. And for the first time in a long time, he believed that Mercy might not have died in these mountains after all. Cassie June stood barefoot on the cold floorboards by the hearth, watching Mara press the infant to her breast in the soft, milky glow of dawn. The smell of wet earth and wood smoke crept in through the cracked window, mingling with the faint sour smell of sweat and sickness clinging to the baby's skin. Joey had made it through the night, but only just. His breath was shallow, his body limp, his eyelids fluttering like a moth in still air. Mara hadn't moved from the rocking chair for hours. Her eyes were red, but dry, too tired for tears. Her nightgown clung damply to her back, and the front was stained with milk. Still, she held him as if he were made of glass and gold simultaneously. Cassie poured hot water into the bowl and brought a rag. "Shall I take him for a moment so you can eat?" Mara slowly shook her head. "No, he must stay warm." "You haven't touched your plate," Cassie observed. Mara finally looked at her. Her voice broke. "Every drop of milk carries a memory I cannot forget." Cassie didn't quite understand what she meant, but she didn't press. She just nodded and placed the rag nearby. Elias arrived toward morning, his boots encrusted with red clay, his hat in his hand. He looked more exhausted than yesterday, dark circles under his eyes, his shoulders tense with unease. As his gaze fell on Joey, he paused and watched the small chest rise and fall against Mara's body. "He made it?" Elias asked. Mara barely looked up. "The fever is stable," Elias nodded. "I brought dried black elderberry. It might help if you boil it." Cassie took the bundle of herbs and went into the kitchen without a word. The two adults sat in heavy silence. Only the creaking of the rocking chair filled the room. "I haven't slept," Mara finally said. "I thought so. I kept thinking, what if he hadn't latched on? What if it had been too late?" Elias watched the fire. "Then we would bury another innocent child in cold earth." Mara flinched. "Don't say that. It's the truth," he replied. "This world doesn't leave much room for second chances." She looked at him, really looked at him. This time there was no judgment in his tone, only weariness, as if he had carried too many truths for too long. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small string of beads, worn and faded. "These belong to his mother," Elias said. "She tied them around his wrist when she gave him to me." Mara reached out and took them. The beads were carved from bone and wood and still faintly warm from his pocket. She gently threaded them around Joey's wrist, like an act of naming. "Where did she come from?" she asked. "From beyond the ridge near Tello Creek. Cherokee, as my mother was." Mara tensed. "That will make things more difficult." "I know." They fell silent again. Joey stirred his tiny hand and touched Mara's collarbone. She didn't move. "Will you bring him further?" she then asked. "If you let me," Elias said. She nodded. "For now." That afternoon, Mara stepped outside for the first time in days, the baby tied securely to her. The late autumn sun slanted through the trees, casting long golden streaks on the ground. Cassie stayed inside, tidying up and boiling the elderberry. Elias helped Mara down the porch steps. "Are you sure you feel up to it? I need air and he needs sun." She looked down at Joey. He's still pale as cream. They walked slowly to the edge of the clearing, where the trees grew thick and the creek whispered behind them. Elias carried his rifle, not for hunting, but out of habit. "How long have you lived up there in the hills?" she then asked. "Since before the war. My father built the cabin. My wife and I stayed there after her people were driven west." Mara flinched. "I'm sorry. She died 3 winters ago. The same disease that wiped out half her clan. I buried her in a tall cedar." Mara touched the beads on Joey's wrist. "And now you have no one but him." "Not anymore," Elias said, looking at her. "He has you too." They reached the stream and sat on a flat stone. Joey squirmed slightly, then fell asleep on Mara's chest. "I thought I had stopped feeling," Mara said after a while. "After Samuel died, the world stood still. Days passed, but I didn't move with them, and now?" She looked down at the baby. "Now I feel everything." Back in the cabin, Cassie watched them return through the window. She noticed Elias's hand hovering over Mara's back, not touching her, but present. She saw Mara's body lean slightly towards him without realizing it, and in Joey's small curled-up form, she saw a bridge neither of them was ready to name. That evening, as Elias rose to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Some women in town saw me ride here." Mara stiffened. "Let them look. They will talk about you, about the child. They already are. You will have to be ready." Mara nodded, her voice firm. "I buried the charm. I am not afraid of gossip." He looked at her for a long moment. "You are stronger than they will ever understand." "I don't need their understanding," she said. "I just need Joey to live." Elias opened the door. The fog was already creeping in deep again. "I'll be back tomorrow." Mara looked down at Joey. "He will wait." After he left, Cassie spoke from the corner where she had been sewing. "The town will not take this lying down." Mara did not answer. She just sat by the fire, rocking, as she gazed at the baby's face. "If they see you with that man again," Cassie said, "they'll do more than just whisper." Mara's voice was soft, but firm. "Let them." Cassie swallowed hard. She didn't say it aloud, but she knew that trouble was already rolling towards them like a storm descending from the mountain. And in the heart of Dry Hollow, behind lace curtains and drawn blinds, Bo Garrison silently swirled his drink, listening to the rumors that drifted through the town like smoke. Tomorrow he would send someone to check just to be sure. Because if the rumors were true, if Mara Whitcomb was nurturing the child of a Cherokee, then she was not just breaking social rules. She was crossing a line that Dry Hollow would never forgive. Garrison leaned on the balcony railing of his second-story office, chewing on a piece of tobacco, watching Dry Hollow unfold beneath him like a rotting peach. His fingers drummed slowly, methodically, on the wood. The streets were quiet that morning. The church bells were still hours from ringing. The general store not yet unlocked. But Bo didn't need noise to feel something shifting. It was in the air, thick as syrup, tense as a misfired gun. Below him, two of his men, Petty and Lucas Warren, waited. App was crude and dumb as an ox. Lucas wasn't much smarter, but asked fewer questions. "Head to the edge of town," Bo said. "See if that drifter has been hanging around again." Lucas adjusted his hat. "Do you want us to talk to the widow?" Bo spat into a spittoon next to his boot. "I want eyes, that's all. Don't stir the pot until I say so." He cracked his knuckles. "What if she has the brood?" Bo's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll see what to do. But for now, observe. Listen." The two men nodded and left. Bo turned back into his office, where a framed photo of his late wife stared blankly from the mantelpiece. He poured himself another drink before noon and whispered into the air. "What begins in shadow always finds its way to light." In the cabin, Mara had already seen the dust plumes rising from the north path. "They're coming," she said, without looking up from Joey's sleeping body. Cassie peered through the window, tensing. "Those are the boys from the saloon." Garrison's men. Elias, who had arrived shortly after sunrise with another bag of herbs and dried fruit, let his hand wander to his belt knife. Mara shook her head. "Not yet. We're not hiding anything. Let them knock." The knocking came loud and arrogant. Elias stepped back into the kitchen while Mara opened the door. Joey cradled in one arm, and Lucas tried not to look directly at the baby. "Morning, Miss Whitcomb," Lucas said smoothly. "Morning," she replied, cool as a streambed. "We're just checking on people," App said, failing to sound casual. "Heard there are visitors up here." "You can tell whoever asks that the people are fine," she said. "And visitors don't need to be taken care of." Lucas leaned forward slightly. "Is that your baby?" "No," Mara said. "But it's in my care." He scratched his stubbly jaw. "He doesn't look like he's from around here." Mara narrowed her eyes. "Neither do you." Lucas smiled painfully. "The town is talking. The Reverend says there are concerns. Then the Reverend can come himself," she snapped, slamming the door in their faces. Inside, Elias exhaled. "You know that will only fan the flames further." "I don't bow to men like these," she retorted. Joey whimpered in her arms, sensing the tension. Mara's tone softened. "He doesn't deserve to grow up in fear." Elias looked at her as if seeing someone for the first time. "Neither do you." In church that Sunday, Reverend Brix stood in the pulpit. His hands trembled more than usual. The air in the nave was charged. He knew what was coming before he stepped forward. The whispers had reached him before the sermon bell rang. He looked over the pews, Garrison in the back with his arms crossed. Miss Wass clutched her purse so tightly, as if faith could leak out. Cale Paynes, the blacksmith, had a look that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Brix cleared his throat. This morning I intended to speak about forgiveness, but I guess we need to talk about fear. A murmur went through the room. There is talk about a woman doing what she can. For a child that is not hers, about a man who is different, and a baby that does not look like us. Bo Garrison raised an eyebrow. Brix continued, "Let me be clear. The Lord did not say, 'Love your neighbor only if he matches your skin color, your last name, or your history,' he said. Love him. That's all." Mrs. Voss stood up abruptly. "Are you saying what she is doing is right?" "I am saying what she is doing is human," Brix replied. "We do well to remember that we are accountable to more than just each other." Bo now also stood up. "Preacher, you are defending a woman who harbors a half-breed under her roof." The room fell silent. Brix straightened up. "I say, I have seen the child and I have seen Mara Whitcomb nourish it from her own body, knowing full well what people like them would say. This is not a sin. This is a sacrifice." Bo walked out without another word, and several followed him. That night, Mara sat in the rocking chair while Elias quietly sharpened his blade. "Do you think it will come to violence?" she asked. Elias did not answer immediately. Violence does not always come with fists. Sometimes it is slower. Words, isolation. That hits you just as deeply. Cassie brought in firewood and paused at the door. "Miss Mara, if they come for him, what will you do?" Mara looked down at Joey, who was sleeping in her arms again. "I will fight." Cassie nodded. "Me too." Elias stood up. "I have seen entire families broken for less. We need help." "From whom?" Mara asked. "There is a man up behind the ridge," Elias said. "His name is Knowledge. He is an elder. Cherokee blood like mine. His word carries weight." "Do you think he would come down here?" Cassie asked. "If I ask him," Elias said, as if he could do it. Mara did not answer, but her silence was not resistance. It was deliberation. Elias added softly, "You don't have to go through this alone." She finally met his gaze. "Then go and bring someone who remembers what justice smells like." He nodded once and turned to the door. 2 days later, the mood in the town had shifted further. Caleb Hayes intercepted Cassie at the well and whispered, "Garrison is collecting signatures to have her removed. Claims she's incompetent." Cassie gritted her teeth. "Incompetent for whom?" "She's saving a baby." "Men like Bo don't care," Caleb muttered. "He wants her gone." Back in the cabin, Mara felt the tide turning. She watched the horizon, waiting. That night, Joey had a coughing fit that lasted until morning. Mara did not sleep again. Her arms ached from holding him. Her soul ached from everything else. Cassie brought her tea and sat on the floor. Perhaps, if people knew more, they wouldn't judge so harshly. Perhaps, Mara said, but most people don't want truth. They want stories that fit their fears. Cassie looked out the window. "Do you think Elias will make it back in time?" Mara did not answer. She just held Joey tighter and said softly, "He must. Because in the morning Garrison would make his next move and Dry Hollow would have to choose which shadow it wanted to stand in." The smoke reached Elias before the fire did. He smelled it on the wind. Sharp, acrid, too fresh to be from a chimney. It was the kind of smoke born of malice, from men who burned not to warm themselves, but to ensure something could not rise again. He came over the last ridge and saw the sky bleeding orange behind the trees. His cabin, what was left of it, crackled and hissed as the flames devoured the last support beams. The timbers groaned, as if they knew they were dying. Elias did not run. He just stood there, jaw locked, fists clenched at his sides. A crow cawed above him. Below, the fire danced like a pyre. Someone had waited until he left. Someone had followed him, and someone wanted to send a message. He stepped forward until the heat kissed his skin and threw his arm in front of his face. On the other side, buried beneath the former floorboards. He saw the edge of a box, blackened but not consumed. He stomped through the smoking ashes to grab it with a piece of cloth. The lid was sunken, the leather straps were gone, but inside, wrapped in deerskin and still dry, were 4 things. His wife's beaded necklace, a charcoal drawing of her face, a child's suede shoe, and a single eagle feather tied together with red thread. He held the feather for a long time before tucking it into his shirt. "Some people carry torches to light the way," he murmured in a low, hollow voice. "Others carry them to burn down bridges." Then he turned and made his way back to Dry Hollow. The smoke trailed behind him like a curse. Mara was by the creek when she saw him coming. The sun was high and hot, and Joey lay wrapped in a basket beside her, finally asleep. She stood up as Elias approached, noticing the soot on his skin and the tension in his stride. "What happened?" she asked. "They burned it down," he said. "Waited until I was gone." Her eyes darted to the trees behind him. "Your cabin," he nodded. "Nothing left but ghosts," and with that, he handed her the sunken box. Mara knelt and unwrapped the contents. Her fingers lingered on the pearl necklace, on the sketch. Her breath caught when she saw the slipper. "You had a child." "We tried. She was born too early. Didn't survive the winter." "I'm sorry," she said. Elias crouched beside her, elbows on his knees. "Don't measure it. We bury what we love out here, and then carry it around with us in pieces." Mara looked at him, her own sorrow mirrored in his. "So now they're not just coming for Joey. They're coming for you too. And for you," he said, "for anyone who is too close." The wind moved through the trees like a breath. Neither of them spoke a word. "I'm not leaving," Mara said finally. "I didn't ask you to." Joey stirred in the basket, his tiny fists clenched. Mara reached out and stroked his head. "He still has a fever." Elias nodded. "Knowledge said he would come. He's a day or 2 behind me. I left a message." "Good. We'll need him." Elias glanced at her. "You're different than I thought." "In what way?" "I thought the grief had hollowed you out," he said. "Turns out it just made room for fire back in town." B. Garrison sat behind his desk, polishing the barrel of his shotgun. Lucas leaned in the doorway. "She didn't give in," Lucas said. "She didn't even bat an eye." B grunted. "And Rich Walker burned down his place. Thought that might shake him." Bo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Some men are shaken, others are sharpened." He stood up and put the shotgun aside. "She's making a martyr of herself." "Good. Martyrs burn just like the rest." Lucas hesitated. "People are watching, but this preacher is starting to talk strangely." "People are watching, but this preacher is starting to talk strangely." Bo's lip curled. "He talks, we remind him whose church it is." Lucas swallowed hard. "What if you take their side?" Posapahi looked at him coldly. "Then we will remind you too." That night, the cabin was silent but tense. Mara sat by the hearth, holding the burned box in her lap. Joey lay tightly wrapped beside her. Elias carved silently at the table, shaping a new rattle from pine wood. Cassie watched them both from the shadows. "You two act like the war has already begun," she said. Elias did not look up. "War doesn't always wait for guns. Sometimes it starts with a knock and ends with silence." Mara didn't speak. She just stared into the flames. Cassie crossed her arms. "They're after his home. What stops them from coming after our heart?" "For nothing," Elias said. Joey coughed softly in his sleep. Mara ran her hand through her hair. "They want to break us apart, drive us to surrender." Cassie sat on the floor. "So what do we do?" Mara looked down at Joey. "We stay together. We stay ready." She turned to Elias. "You said some people carry torches to burn down bridges. What do we carry?" Elias met her gaze. "Whatever is left when everything else is gone." The next morning brought thick clouds and a tension so heavy it settled into the floorboards. Mara stood on the porch with Joey in her arms when she saw Reverend Bricks riding up the path. She didn't wait for him to dismount. "Are you here to pray or to judge?" she asked. "Neither," Bricks said. "I've come to listen." He slowly walked up the steps, his boots creaking on the wood. He looked at the baby, then at Mara. He looks stronger, the Reverend said. He is, Mara said. People are scared, he admitted. But not all of them are filled with hate. Bloodlines don't matter to this baby. Only arms that hold on, she said. Why can't you see that? Brick sighed. Fear blinds people. But maybe if they hear your story. No, Mara interrupted. You don't get my story. You get my decision. I have decided to keep him alive. That's all that should matter. Bricks nodded slowly. You are right. But stories loosen the soil before change can take root. She did not answer. He stepped back to his horse and turned around once more. When it comes to blows, you will not be alone. As he rode away, Elias emerged from the forest with a bag of herbs and a serious expression. What's wrong? Mara asked. They're planning something? Lucas warned about the well path. That's the back path? Mara's heart sank. When? It will be tonight, maybe tomorrow. Mara looked towards the tree line. We must be ready. Elias reached into his coat and handed her the finished rattle. For Joey, in case he wakes up scared. She turned it in her hand, smooth and warm from the wood. Thank you. Elias lightly touched her arm. We stand or fall together now. And as the sun began to sink behind the ridge, casting long bluish shadows across the earth, Mara looked out into the shadows creeping towards her hut and said softly, Let them come. Cassie June watched from the attic window as the morning mist curled around the edge of the forest, as if it had secrets to tell. Below, Mara stood barefoot on the porch, rocking Joey in her arms, while Elias chopped wood, with a rhythm that was steady for someone who hadn't slept. The world hadn't exploded, not yet, but the air was thick with waiting. He slept almost all night, Mara said, looking at Elias without turning her head. The fever is slowly breaking, but it is breaking, Elias replied, wiping his brow with his sleeve. Still too quiet, she murmured. Elias nodded. Storms are always like that just before they break, inside. Cassie moved through the house, gathering herbs, blankets, anything they might need if the situation escalated. She caught her reflection in the window, eyes older than her years. She pressed her fingers against the glass and whispered, A child doesn't care about bloodlines, only arms that hold on. That's what she had learned by watching Mara. From Joey. From the way Elias kept watch without being asked. It was the kind of truth she hadn't known she needed until now. Around noon, Mara went to Dry Hollow, Joey wrapped tightly to her chest. Cassie came along, her head held high. They walked down the main street as if they had every right to, because they did. Elias did not come along. He stayed behind, posted on the back path, looking out for trouble. People stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. A dog barked and was quickly silenced. No one moved to greet them, but no one dared to stand in their way either. Mara entered the general store. Mr. Tallon, the owner, looked up from behind the counter. His hands paused halfway through lifting a sack of flour. I need formula, she said simply. And more bandages. Tolan cleared his throat. Are you nursing the baby or what? I am, she replied. But he's not gaining enough weight yet. He needs both. Tolan hesitated. I don't know if I... Mara stepped forward and placed a silver coin on the counter. He's a child. Not a crime. Tolan blinked, nodded, and began to pack the supplies into a brown paper bag. I'll add peppermint oil. It might help his lungs. Thank you, she said softly. Cassie stood at the door, watching as the town watched her. No one said a word, but their eyes spoke volumes. They spoke of fear, disgust, confusion, but also something else. Uncertainty. Back at the cabin, Elias saw the figures in the distance first. Two riders moving slowly and deliberately. One was Lucas Warren. The other wore a hat too clean for a farmhand and boots polished like city brass. Deputy, Elias muttered under his breath. He moved to the edge of the woods, remaining just hidden. As the men arrived, Elias stepped out from behind a tree, rifle casually slung over his shoulder. Morning, gentlemen, he said. Are you looking for trouble or just stretching your legs? Lucas tipped his hat. Just checking on Miss Whitcomb. Heard she's been walking around town. She has every right to, Elias said. Like anyone else, the deputy, new to town, spoke up. People say she has a baby in her care. A baby that isn't hers. Elias stepped forward, calm but direct. A baby someone else left to die. She's feeding it. Is that a crime now? Lucas looked away, jaw tight. The deputy adjusted his belt. I'm not here to make trouble. Just asking questions. You asked, Elias said. Now you have your answer. She's inside. The baby's sleeping. If you knock too loud and wake it, you'll answer to her, not me. There was a pause. Lucas mumbled. Come on, let's go. They turned back towards town. Elias watched them go, then slowly exhaled. They were testing boundaries now to see who would yield. That meant the true storm was not far off. Later that evening, Reverend Brix arrived unannounced. He came on foot, alone with empty hands. Mara opened the door, tired but not unfriendly. Are you here to warn me again? No, Brix said. I'm here to stand by your side. She stepped aside and let him in. He sat down by the hearth and looked at Joey, who was now sleeping in a wicker basket lined with blankets. He's stronger. He's a fighter. Brix nodded. I spent last night writing a sermon I thought might change hearts. But it won't. Not on its own. Mara crossed her arms. Why bother then? Because it's a start, he said, and because I believe in what you're doing, others do too. They're just scared. Scared of what? Of a baby with the wrong skin. Brix didn't flinch. Afraid of what it means if they're wrong. Afraid of having to admit that someone they look down on is doing something sacred. Mara looked down. They'll try to take him from me. I know. Will you stop them? Brix met her gaze. I'll try, but when it comes to the law, you'll need more than a preacher. You'll need proof that he belongs here. Mara stepped away, opened the drawer, and pulled out the beaded bracelet Elias had saved from the fire. That's all we have, she said. Brix nodded. It might be enough if someone is willing to speak for him. That night, Elias returned with the news that knowledge would arrive at dawn. He's bringing 2 others, Elias said. Elders. They'll testify if it comes to that. Good, Mara replied. She sat on the porch, Joey pressed to her chest. The baby was quiet, sleepy. His tiny hand clutched her finger as if he had always known it. Elias sat beside her. Cassie leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. They're coming, Cassie said. You can feel it in the earth. I know, Mara whispered. Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. They'll say, this baby doesn't belong here, but he does, Mara said. He belongs to life, to breath, to hope. Elias looked sideways. Are you ready for what that means? She nodded. I claimed him for myself in town today, she said. Elias blinked. What? I told them he was mine. Not by blood, but by choice. Cassie swallowed hard. Do you think that will protect him? No, Mara said. But it tells the truth, loud enough that maybe someone will listen. She looked down at Joey again. He doesn't care where he comes from, only that someone stayed far beyond the grade. Be watched. Garrison, flickering like torchlight on the back of a barn. He lit a match on his boot and then his cigar. Tomorrow he would call a hearing, not legal, just public, loud, angry, mean. And if people wouldn't act, he would force their hand. Because once a woman claims what isn't hers, others might get the same idea. And Bo Garrison wouldn't let Dry Hollow forget who it belonged to. The river was high that morning, swollen from last night's rain, agitated as if carrying every secret these hills had ever whispered. Fog hung over the low-lying ground. The birds weren't singing. Even the wind held its breath. Mara Whitcomb knelt at the water's edge, her skirt soaked to the hem, holding Joey tightly to her chest. The child slept deeply, his breath even, his skin now warmer. She could feel his little heartbeat against her ribs. The beads around his wrist glittered faintly in the gray light. She hadn't intended to go all the way down to the river, but her feet had carried her there, as if the land itself had a memory and wanted her to remember too. Behind her, Elias approached quietly. Is everything all right? He asked. She didn't turn around. I used to come here with Samuel before he got sick. Elias stepped closer. The river's current rushed past them like liquid time. He threw pebbles and told me which ones brought luck. Always said the flat ones skipped better because they were brave. Mara rocked Joey slowly. I buried his ashes on the hill over there. Didn't tell anyone. Not even the preacher. Elias didn't interrupt. I thought if I kept him near the water, he wouldn't feel so alone. Or maybe I wouldn't. Finally, she looked at Elias. Her face was pale but calm. That's the thing about grieving out here. It doesn't ask permission. It just lives with you in the dirt. Elias nodded. Sometimes the dirt knows more than we do. A branch snapped sharply and suddenly behind them. They both turned as Knowledge stepped out of the trees, flanked by two others. Hosa and Tyranida, elders of the clan. Mara rose, instinctively shifting Joey in her arms. Elias greeted them with a brief nod. You were quick. Knowledge's face was lined with years, his eyes clear. He looked first at the baby, then at Mara and finally at Elias. This is the child. Elias stepped forward. His mother was of your blood. She gave him to me before she died. No one but us knows his name. Knowledge stepped forward. Mara stiffened. But the man only placed 2 fingers lightly on Joey's forehead. He bears the dream mark, he said softly. Hosa stepped forward next. We remember his mother. She came from Red Willow. Died too young, but strong. Born in winter, Tyranida added. She named him Iasti, the little one. He has a name, Knowledge said. And that name carries weight. Mara blinked. Joey. His name is Iasti. Knowledge looked at her. You may call him what you wish, but the spirits will know the truth. Mara looked down at the child. Then I will know it too. Elias exhaled slowly. They are planning a hearing in town. Garrison wants to strip Mara of her rights. Make it loud, ugly. We will come, Knowledge said. We will speak. The child belongs to his people. That makes him a part of you too. Mara held him tighter. I am not afraid of you, but I am afraid for him. Knowledge looked across the river. Then we stand between him and fear. In the late afternoon, the cabin swelled with quiet energy. Cassie baked bread without being asked. Elias silently cleaned his rifle. The elders sat by the hearth, drinking black tea brewed from roots they had brought from the mountain. Mara put on a faded blue dress, one she hadn't worn since Samuel's funeral. She braided her hair, tucked the eagle feather Elias had given her behind her ear, and held Iasti with arms that no longer trembled. They will try to shame you, Elias said softly. Let them try, she replied. Cassie came in, wiping her hands. The town square is already filling up. Bo has set up a box as if it were a church. Mara raised an eyebrow. Good, let him preach. She cast one last look through the cabin, then stepped out onto the porch where the late sun illuminated the edge of the forest. She said not a word, but the elders rose. Elias stood beside her. As they walked down the path to Dry Hollow, Cassie whispered to herself, Today the water will not carry away what does not belong here. It will remember. In town, Garrison stood on that wooden box as if it were a throne. The people had gathered. Some out of curiosity, some out of fear, a few out of malice. He raised his hand. Folks, today we're talking straight. There is a woman living on the edge of town raising a child that is not hers. A child that does not belong to our kind. A murmur went through the crowd. Bricks stood at the back, arms crossed, silent. Bo continued. It's not about hate. It's about order, about the law. The child has no papers, no family in this city. She can't just claim it. Then the crowd parted. Mara stepped forward. Iasti, in her arms, flanked by Elias and the elders. Bo's voice faltered. What is this? Mara climbed onto the box. Silence spread like wildfire. She held Iasti up, not high, not like a show, but with reverence. This is Iasti. His name means the little one. His mother gave him to a man she trusted. That man brought him to me when he had no one else. I nourished him. I kept him alive, and I will not let you extinguish him. Bo tried to intervene. You have no right. Knowledge's voice cut through like a blade. She has the oldest right, the right to protect, the right to name. And we, his people, bear witness to it. Tanita stepped forward, raising the pearl bracelet. These belong to his mother. We can prove his lineage. We know who he is. Bo turned to the crowd. And what about the law? Brix finally stepped forward. Sometimes, Bo, the law is written by cowards, but the truth, that doesn't change. Silence. Mara looked around, her gaze hard as stone. This city has drawn lines in the dirt long enough. If you want to say that this child doesn't belong here, say it, but say it knowing that you prefer fear to mercy. Easti stirred, blinked up at her, and reached out for the setting sun. Cassie stepped beside her. He belongs here because we say so, because he is loved. Bo descended, his face red with anger. This isn't over yet. No, said Mara. It's just beginning. That night, the city was silent. The elders returned with them to the hut and sat by the fire like old dormant trees. Mara bathed Easti in a bowl of warm water, kissed his forehead, and laid him by the fire. Elias sat nearby. You spoke like a woman who knew the river wouldn't carry her away. Mara smiled faintly, because I finally know that I am not the one drifting. Outside, the river flowed on, but this time it didn't feel like it was pulling her underwater. Felt like it was carrying her forward. The firelight flickered across the hut walls, casting long, moving shadows. They danced like ghosts with ancient grudges. The elders had returned to the grave, their duty fulfilled, but the weight of their presence still hung in the room like smoke. Cassie slept in the attic. Hajos dozed in the cradle Elias had carved just days ago. His chest rose evenly and surely, but Mara couldn't sleep. She sat at the table, turning a piece of paper in her hands. B. Garrison's new petition. Someone had slipped it under her door that morning, dripping with threat but disguised as law. Elias stood at the window, eyes fixed on the tree line. He's not done yet, I know, Mara said. But I also know what fear looks like. That speech I gave didn't scare him. The silence of the crowd did. Elias stepped away from the glass. He doesn't like to lose ground. He's not just angry at me, Mara added. He's angry that we let them see something he's worked so hard to keep hidden. She put down the petition. I won't let him rewrite the ending. Not for Easti, not for any of us. Elias pulled a small bag of salt from his coat and placed it on the table. Mara looked at him, confused. What's that for? It's for the corners, the windows, the threshold. My grandmother always said it keeps the darkness from entering uninvited. Mara gave him a crooked smile. I may not believe, but it has helped before. So they did it together in silence. Elias sprinkled salt on the windowsills and Mara traced it with her finger on the doorstep. It felt ridiculous and necessary at the same time, like armor sewn from memory. When they were finished, they stood outside for a moment. The sky vast above them and cold with stars. Elias broke the silence. Do you ever think about leaving? Circumstantially, Mara admitted, but then I think, why should I be the one to run? Elias looked at her calmly. You have fight in you, Mara Whitcomb. She looked out into the trees. It's not just fight, it's roots. Behind them, Easti stirred and let out a small cry. Mara went inside to comfort him. But Elias lingered a moment longer. He could feel it. Something was coming. Not fast, not loud, but it was creeping closer. A kind of war that didn't start with bullets. It started with fear. Bison sat in his study. A single candle burned low. The petition lay open on the desk. His signature at the top, bold and angry, but fewer names followed than he had expected. He gripped the edge of the table. They didn't slip from him quickly, but enough to matter. And if fear no longer held them, then salt lines and lullabies might win. He poured himself a drink. The amber liquid trembled in his glass. If you're not afraid of shadows, he murmured, then I will teach them to fear fire. The next morning, Cassie found the message smeared on the well, a crude symbol painted with tar. A warning, not just for Mara, but for anyone who stood with her. Mara scrubbed it off with lye and ash. Her hands were sore when she finished. Brix arrived just before noon, carrying a wrapped loaf of bread and a face full of worry. They're planning something, he said. Something worse than hearings or speeches? Elias crossed his arms. We know it. Mara took the bread and put it down. Let them come. Bricks looked between them. There are limits to how much a woman can endure alone. I am not alone, she replied. Not anymore. That night, Elias moved his bedroll into the main room. Cassie kept a knife under her pillow. Mara placed a branch of dried salt by Aosti's cradle. It didn't feel like superstition, it felt like preparation. 3 nights later, the fire came. It started in the barn. Traía y burned quickly. Flames licked at the sky as if they had teeth. When Elias ran out with a bucket, half the building was already gone. Cassie screamed from the doorstep. Mara rushed out into the clearing with Aosti, shielding him from the smoke. Elias called into the shadows, "Show your face, coward!" But no one stepped forward. By dawn, the barn was ash and sunken bones. The goats had escaped, but not the chickens. Smoke curled from the ruins as the sun broke through the low-hanging clouds. House coughed once, then settled on Mara's shoulder. "I knew you would try," she said, her voice firm. "But I thought they would wait longer." Elias picked up a half-burned beam. "They wanted to scare us, not destroy us." Not yet. Bricks arrived an hour later. "You must go, not forever, just until this cools down." "I'm not hiding," Mara said. "It's not hiding," Bricks said. "It's survival. There's a safe house near Bucksridge, a place the Union used during the war. Secluded, defensible." Elias nodded. "I know it." Bricks looked at Aosti. "He deserves more than ash and shadows." Mara looked down at the child. "He deserves a future." And then she said to herself, "Let them burn what they want. They cannot touch what I carry within me." They packed only the essentials that night. Cassie wrapped her mother's Bible in cloth. Elias cleaned and loaded his rifle. The forest around them was not just cover. It was a warning system of its own. 2 birds sounded the alarm. Elias could read the silence like a ledger. On the 4th day, a figure appeared between the trees. Ronan. He wore the mountains like a second skin. Leather vest, silver in his beard, and eyes that had seen too much and said too little. Cassie rushed out, arms wide open. Uncle Elias tensed until he recognized the man. Ronan hugged her briefly, then entered without invitation, as only family did. "Brick sent word," he said. "Told me you'd need help." Mara eyed him suspiciously. "And what kind of help do you offer?" Ronan took off his hat and threw it on the table. "The kind that shoots straighter than it talks, and the kind that remembers where the old path lines run, the ones they don't teach in the city." Elias grinned. "We could use that." They spent the night studying maps Ronan drew from memory. Paths, blind spots, old logging roads. The land itself would fight for them if they used it right. "Where will the search come from?" Ronan said, "Not himself. He will send someone else. They will play nice first, then hard." "We don't have to win a war," Mara said. "We just have to outlast him." "Long enough," Elias added, "for the city to stop following a man just because he shouts loudly." Cassie lit a lantern and hung it in the window. A small light, a signal just in case someone out there needed to know they weren't alone. That night, Aosti woke with a cry. Mara carried him outside and walked with him under the stars. The forest was silent. Even the wind felt cautious. She looked up and said softly, "You were born in fire, little one, but you will grow in the silence between the storms." Behind her, Elias stepped onto the porch. "Are you all right?" She nodded. "It'll be fine." He leaned against the railing. "Do you think we can sit this out?" "I believe the land remembers better than people. And this land also remembers mercy." Elias looked at her in the moonlight. "That's a heavy burden you're carrying." "I'm not carrying it alone." Ias stirred in her arms. Mara whispered to him, "We're not just surviving. We're showing them how." 2 days later, a shot echoed at the edge of the clearing. Elias was the first out, rifle raised. Ronan followed, low and quiet. They found a man bleeding under a pine tree. "No perpetrator." A hired spear, judging by the boots. Elias looked for others. Ronan roughly bandaged the man's wound, but not fatally. When the spear came to, Elias asked, "Who sent you?" The man coughed blood, didn't say, just paid. "Told me to find the baby, mark the spot. More are coming." Elias slowly stood up. Then we'll send them a message back. They let the man live, but barely. Ronan carved a mark into the neem tree, the same symbol Baunan had painted, but this time burned into the bark and inverted. They'll understand what it means, Ronan said. What does it mean? You too, Cassie asked. Ronan gave her a look. It means the hunted also know how to hunt. That night Mara couldn't sleep. She sat at the table with a fresh map and a list of names. People in Dry Hollow who had remained silent. Not yet enemies, but not allies either. We can't fight all of them, she said. Elias sat opposite her. We don't have to. Ronan poured coffee into 3 tin cups. We don't have to convert every heart, just enough to turn the tide. Cassie came down the stairs, holding Usti in her arms. The child looked around the room as if it understood everything. The firelight, the fear, the struggle. Mara reached out and touched his cheek. He will remember it, not as war, but as a way of becoming. And from the edge of the forest, another lantern flickered faintly. Someone out there had seen Cassie's light and lit their own. In the morning, after the spear had been sent back, marked and bleeding, another silence fell over the woods around Bug's Ridge. Not peaceful, not fearful, but watchful, as if even the trees were waiting for what came next. In the cabin, Ronan sharpened a skinning knife while Elias cleaned his rifle. Cassie kneaded dough with a steady rhythm and Mara nursed Iosti, keeping an eye on the window. The fire in the hearth crackled softly and steadily. Survival had become routine, but no one mistook it for peace. Mara broke the silence. They will come back, and next time they won't just send one. Ronan didn't look up. Then we don't just prepare to survive, we prepare to send them back changed. Cassie set the dough aside to rise. We can't just fight with bullets. The people in Dry Hollow need to see more than just fear. They need to see the truth. Mara nodded. Which means we stop hiding and start nurturing them. Elias raised an eyebrow. Nurturing. Part blood has already been shed, Mara said. Now it's time for bread. Cassie looked up, her eyes catching the firelight. Do you want to change a city? Start with what they break their fast with. By noon, Ronan and Elias had explored 4 safe routes into the city. Cassie wrote a list of people they trusted. Those who had helped in small, quiet ways, people who might be willing to stand up if they saw they weren't alone. Mara packed small loaves of bread wrapped in cloth and put a sprig of dried sai in each. Not just food, she said. A message. Elias nodded. They will understand. Mara and Cassie rode out that afternoon. Their cloaks pulled tight, baskets hung over their saddlebags. The forest gave way to open fields, and soon Dry Hollow appeared, smaller than it had ever looked. Not because it had changed, but because they had. They didn't go to the marketplace, they went door to door. The preacher's wife opened her door first, her eyes wide with worry that melted into something like hope. For the little ones, Mara said, placing the bread in her hands. Next came old Tomlin, who had once refused to share water with Cassie. This time he didn't speak, just took the bread, nodded, and slowly closed the door, as if afraid of how much he felt. By sunset, they had visited 11 houses, rekindling 11 small fires. As they rode back to Buck's Ridge, Cassie turned to Mara. Do you think it's enough? It's a start, Mara said. And for now, that's all. That night, there was a knock at the cabin door. 3 gentle taps, then silence. Elias opened it slowly. Outside stood 2 women and a boy, no older than 12. The boy held a lantern. One woman clutched a sack of flour. The other held a rifle in trembling hands. We heard you might need hands, said the woman with the sack. Ronan stepped forward. There's enough work for everyone. The next day more came. A carpenter, a field nurse, a mute old man with a cart full of scrap metal. They didn't come loudly. They came ready. Each brought something. Small amounts of food, tools, old letters from relatives who had fought against hatred before. The cabin couldn't hold them all, so they built extensions and tents under the trees. The safe house became something entirely different. A beginning, a resistance. Bo Garrison learned of it through Lucas, who delivered the news as if it were poison on his tongue. They're feeding the people, organizing themselves. They say some call it the circle of the grad. Bo stood in his office, fists clenched at his sides. She believes bread can defeat blood. Lucas said nothing. Bo knocked over a chair. You want to change a town? You burn its roots. He took a bottle from the shelf, smashed it against the wall, and stared at the dark stain it left. They think they've started a fire, he snarled. I'll show them a goddamn inferno on the grad. The nights grew colder, but the circle grew stronger. Cassie started a tradition. Every evening, the assembled broke bread by the fire and shared a story. Not always dramatic, sometimes just a memory, a lesson, a name. This is how we nourish more than just stomachs, she said. This is how we remember what we stand for. One evening, a man named Silas stood up and said, My brother followed Bo. He thought he was protecting something. It turned out he was just afraid of losing what he never deserved. I don't want to be that kind of man. Another evening, Mara stood up. My husband died quietly. The fever took him slowly. But even toward the end, he told me, Don't let the world make you small, Mara. I didn't understand what he meant until now. She looked around the circle at Iosti, who was sleeping on Cassie's lap, at the people who were once afraid to speak and now sat with rifles on their knees. I'm tired of being small. On the 12th day, Bricks arrived. Ronan met him on the path, rifle at the ready, until he saw the man's face. They're planning something big, Bricks said breathlessly. They're getting men from Black Hollow, paid gunmen.
No locals.
They don't care about laws or children. Mara stepped out of the hut. How long do we have? Maybe 2 nights. 3 if we're lucky. Elias stepped beside her. Then we use every hour. Mara looked at the hills, where lanterns now lit the darkness, and rose. We have bled. We have broken bread. And now she took a deep breath. Let's build. She turned to the people. No more running. No more waiting. Cassie handed her the small silver bell from the hut door. Mara rang it once. The sound echoed down the ridge through the woods into every heart that was still listening. They were not a camp. They were a force, and Dry Hollow would feel it. The ridge smelled of cedar smoke and steel. Tools clanged in rhythm. Hammer on nail, shovel in earth. The people of the ridge circle worked as if time had run out, because it had. Brick's warning had ignited a fire under every pair of hands. Makeshift barricades rose like crooked teeth along the treeline. Trenches were dug, snares laid. Mara oversaw everything with Iosti on her back, his tiny hands clutched in her scarf. Cassie led a group boiling pitch. To seal the joints of the hut, Elias trained those who could hold a rifle. Ronan carved lookout posts into the trunks of pine trees. They were not preparing for a fair fight. They were preparing to survive the first blow. Night came quickly. Stars twinkled over the ridge, as if they too were waiting. Elias sat sharpening his blade. As Mara came over, quiet as snowfall. How many do you think they'll send? She asked him. Enough to shake us. Not enough to end us. Mara looked out at the shadows beyond the treeline. Then we'll make sure the ground remembers them. From behind, Cassie whispered. You don't stop the storm by hoping it changes course. You barricade the door and load the damn rifle. The first blow came just before dawn. 2 riders quietly crept through the southern woods to test the border. Instead, they found the first tripwire. The sharp snap of a branch under pressure startled their horses. One reared, throwing its rider. The other bolted. Dronin was with them before they could get up. He didn't shoot. He just drove them at gunpoint to the edge of the ridge and said, Go tell your boss we're not prey. We are ground with teeth. The men ran. It wasn't the battle, it was the message. And messages spread faster than fire. Bogerson paced his barn like a wolf in a cage. They let him live. Lucas nodded, sent him back trembling. Bo turned, grabbed a pitchfork and slammed it against the wall. That wasn't a defense, that was theater. Lucas hesitated. It worked. Bo stared at him. We're not stopping now. We're breaking their line tonight. The circle of the ridge did not sleep. The fires burned low, casting orange halos on every face. Mara sat there. Iosti pressed to her chest, singing softly. Cassie distributed dried meat. Elias loaded fresh cartridges into each rifle. Fronan set traps where no one would expect them. When the first torch flickered on the horizon, no one flinched. The hired men came from 3 sides. Quiet, fast, brutal, but the land was not silent. It screamed back. One fell into a pit trap lined with carved stakes. Another's torch ignited a pitch-soaked net that fell from the trees. Chaos erupted. Elias fired once, twice, missed on the third. Ronan took one down with a single shot through the thigh. Mara ducked behind a rock ledge with Cassie and the baby, whispering prayers and curses into the darkness. The cabin door barely held. A man struck with an axe. Elias awaited him on the other side with the rifle butt. A crack, a groan. Silence. On the eastern edge, a fire broke out, but was quickly smothered by the wet blankets Cassie and 2 others threw over it. For 15 minutes it was a tangle of smoke, sweat, screaming. Then came the whistle. 3 sharp blasts from Ronan, retreat. The attackers disappeared into the woods. The grad held, but only just. The bodies were counted. One of them was wounded, a boy no older than 16. Mara sat with him, bandaged his shoulder and whispered, "You did not fall. You stood." The others gathered, tired but alive. Elias stood in the middle, blood on his hands. None of it was his. "That was Bo's warning," Ronan said. Mara looked out into the darkness. "Then here is ours. We are still standing." She took the bell and rang it once. Back in the city, Bo cursed the failure. He lets them believe they are soldiers. Lucas said nothing. Bo reached for his coat. "Then we stop treating them like rebels and start treating them like traitors." Lucas flinched. "You want to kill them?" Bo's voice was ice. "I will put an end to this theater and I will make sure they beg before the curtain falls." The next morning, silence hung like fog. The wounded were tended to, the traps reset, the fire rekindled. But the circle knew that Bo would not give in now. He would come harder, angrier, and next time he would bring fire not just to burn but to destroy. Mara stood with Elias and Ronan, drawing new lines in the dirt with a stick. "He wants to break our spirit," Elias said. "Then we will make our spirit louder than his fire." Cassie stepped forward, injured but bold. "We sent a message. Now we raise a voice." They all looked down at Dry Hollow, a town that was still sleeping, still unsure, but waking up. The next step would not just be defense, it would be a testimony, and it would shake the valley. The valley held its breath. The aftermath of the first attack hung heavy over the circle of the grad, like smoke that would not dissipate. Bruised arms, burned wood, wounded pride. But the spirit had never burned brighter. Prax returned with the news that Bo was gathering more men, offering payment and promising pardons for past sins. And he had begun to call Mara by name in the square, loudly and bitterly. "He wants your blood," Prax said, "not your ideas, not your people, you." Mara stared into the fire. Eos sat next to her, chewing on a carved wooden ring that Cassie had made. "He can want it," Mara said. "Doesn't mean he gets it." On the other side of the camp, Cassie paced back and forth. "We are always waiting for them to bring the fight to us. But maybe it's time for us to bring the truth." "What do you mean?" Elias asked. Cassie said, her eyes firm, "We are going to Dry Hollow. Not with torches, but with stories, with faces, with the truth." Ronan sat up straight. "You're talking about a testimony." "Exactly, not a raid, a reckoning." Mara met their gaze. "Are you sure it won't turn into a lynching?" Cassie smiled sadly and dryly. "Not if we bring those Boychkin silence." Mara stood up and put on her coat. "Then we'll do it at dawn." She turned to the people, her voice soft and unwavering. "You only silence what you fear, so let's hear him come." They came down the ridge with the rising sun. Not in secret, not in shadow. They came on foot, old, young, wounded, strong. No guns raised, only eyes. Mara held Aosti. Cassie walked by her side. Elias and Ronan flanked the rear guard. At least 30 others followed. Each held a lantern or a bell or nothing but determination. Dry Hollow had never seen anything like it. The townspeople stopped mid-stride, mid-sentence, as the circle passed from the ridge. Some stared, others whispered. A woman dropped her basket. They didn't stop until they reached the square. Bo was already there. He stood on the steps of the town hall, like a man surprised in the middle of a speech. Lucas next to him, hand on his revolver. Mara stepped forward, steadfast. "You talk loud, Bo," she shouted. "But now you'll listen." The square was now filled with perhaps 100 people.
Silently Bo left.
"Do you really think parading through town as if you were Jesus with his strays? Will anything change?" "No," said Cassie, stepping next to Mara. "But the truth isn't about changing you. It's about freeing everyone else." She turned to the crowd. "How many of you helped us? Given blot, given message, warned." First no hands. Then an old man near the saloon raised his. Then the preacher's wife. Then the baker. Oh, then 15, then 24. Bo's expression turned sour. Mara raised her voice. "We came here to remind you that this town doesn't belong to him. It has always belonged to you. And what you allow now will decide what your children inherit later." He looked at Boer in a friendly way. Bo stepped down from the steps. "Your mama should keep her mouth shut." The crowd stirred. Mara looked Bo firmly in the eyes. "You want to end this? Do it now, but you won't do it in the shadows. You'll do it while all of Dry Hollow watches." Bo drew his revolver. Elias moved, hand already on his holster, but Ronan's voice cut through. Mara did not flinch. "Go on, Bo, make yourself the master of fear or put the weapon away and prove that you have even a drop of man in you."
Bo hesitated.
Lucas stepped forward. "Bo, shut up."
Bo snapped.
But something broke in the square. No sound, just silence. The kind that happens when people stop following. Bo saw it and he lowered the weapon. Not completely, but enough. Cassie stepped between them. "We didn't come to hang you. We came to bury what you built. Quietly, together or not." She looked around. "This is your choice." A woman near the general store stepped forward. "My son is on the grad. He fought last night, bled for it." She turned to Bo. "You didn't even know." Bo looked around. Faces he had known for years, now unreadable. Lucas took a step back. "I built this town." He pushed Bo forward. Mara shook her head. "No, you suffocated it. We are here to let it breathe." Bo's hand trembled. Then he dropped the weapon. It hit the ground with a dull thud. He turned and walked away. No one followed him. The square remained silent for one beat longer. Then the preacher stepped forward. "Let them speak," and they did. One by one, the circle from the grad stood up, called their names, their stories, their truths. No flames, no fists, only voices. Dry Hollow listened. The bells they had carried began to ring, one after another, not as a warning, but as a testament. That night, no barricades were rebuilt on the ridge, no guns reloaded, only firewood stacked, bread broken. The first continuous sleep in weeks descended upon the valley. But sleep was not surrender. Mara sat by the fire, holding Aosti and watching the smoke curl up to the stars. "We held our ground," she whispered. "Now we heal." Behind her, Elias whispered back. "Not all wounds show blood." And down from the town, lights flickered, not from fear, but from understanding. The ground had shifted, and something old had ended. Something new waited at dawn. Winter came gently that year. The snow did not bury the ridge. It covered it lightly, cleanly, gently, as if the land was exhaling a long-held breath. No fires burned from fear anymore, only for warmth, only for stories. Mara stood on the porch of the rebuilt cabin. Aosti tugged at the hem of her coat, now running with an unsteady wobble and a laugh that seemed too loud for a child born in fire. She smiled, bent down, and picked him up. "He still doesn't like shoes," Elias said from the steps. A cup of coffee warmed his hands. "He was born ready to run," Mara said. "This time not from something," "No," she said, "but towards something." The circle from the ridge had not dissolved. It had taken root. Some families stayed, some returned to Dry Hollow. Not in retreat, but with purpose. They took on new roles. School teachers, carpenters, midwives, not as rebels, but as manna. Cassie had moved into a small house near the old train tracks and turned it into a place where women could come when they had nowhere else to go. A roof, Emil, a voice that said, "You still matter." Ronan had moved further north, sending back letters with pressed wildflowers and notes about other towns where people were waking up to themselves. The garrison never left Dry Hollow, but he never spoke publicly again. Lucas now ran the general store more quietly, more vigilantly. Not every man changes, but sometimes silence becomes less cruel. The preacher started ringing the bell again, now only on Sundays, not as a warning, for weddings, for births. In the spring, they planted a garden where the first trap had been laid. Not just any garden, a big one with corn and beans and tomatoes and a plaque that read "Nourished with courage, grown in truth." Children played among the rows. No one told them not to be loud. One afternoon, Cassie stood next to Mara at the edge of the garden, watching Aosti try to catch a butterfly. "He'll know," Cassie said. "Know what?" "Oh, what you did. What we all did. Even if he can't remember it." It was the promise that a valley, however broken, could learn to hold light again.